From an early age, I sensed that something wasn't right in our family. My twin brother and I were like day and night, not only in our interests but especially in the way our parents treated us. While my brother was praised for even the smallest academic achievement, I never seemed good enough in my parents' eyes. His birthday parties were big events with many guests, while my birthday, although on the same day, was treated like an annoying side note. "You should follow your brother's example," was the phrase I heard most often. My passion for sports was dismissed as a waste of time. Instead, I was supposed to sit over school books for hours, just like him. I wasn't allowed to invite friends over, while his room was regularly filled with classmates. Only my grandmother seemed to see how much I suffered under this unequal treatment. During her visits, she would secretly bring me my favorite chocolate, and sometimes slip me some pocket money. "You are special," she would whisper to me then. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The situation intensified when I entered puberty. While my brother got a smartphone, I was denied even the possession of a simple cell phone. When my parents discovered that I had secretly installed Snapchat to stay in touch with school friends, the situation escalated. They not only took away my phone but also removed the door to my room. "Privacy must be earned," they said. My brother, instead of standing by me, took advantage of the situation. He began stealing small things and blaming me for it. Our parents believed him without hesitation. After all, he was the good one, the reliable one. I, on the other hand, became more and more the black sheep of the family. Despite everything, I had a large circle of friends at school. I was outgoing and open-minded, while my brother struggled to connect with others. His growing jealousy of my social contacts would soon prove fateful, though I didn't suspect that at the time. The only moments of comfort I found were with my grandmother. During the weekends I was allowed to spend with her, I could simply be myself for a short time. She listened when I talked about my dreams and encouraged me to believe in myself, regardless of what my parents said. But the relative calm of this time wouldn't last long. What I didn't know, my brother was already making plans that would fundamentally change my life. Plans based on lies that would ultimately lead to me losing everything that was familiar to me. The situation escalated on an ordinary school day. My brother showed up to class with a black eye. When classmates asked what had happened, he told them with feigned reluctance that I had hit him at home. "She's jealous because our parents like me more," he whispered to his new friends. At first, I only noticed subtle changes. Friends who usually sat with me suddenly chose other seats. Conversations would stop when I approached. During breaks, I increasingly found myself alone. It wasn't until my best friend turned away from me that I learned about the rumors. "Your brother told us everything," she said with an accusatory look. "How you beat him up at home and terrorize him. He showed us the bruises." Stunned, I listened as she repeated my brother's fabricated stories. Stories of alleged violent outbursts, of nightly attacks, of systematic bullying. When I confronted my brother, he just smiled coldly. "You deserve nothing less," he said. "Now everyone knows who you really are." I saw in his eyes a mixture of triumph and malice that frightened me. The boy before me was no longer the brother I had grown up with. The situation reached its peak when the principal called me to his office. My parents were already sitting there, with my brother beside them, theatrically trembling. The principal confronted me with the accusations. My brother played his role perfectly, the frightened victim who had finally found the courage to speak up. My mother cried, while my father pierced me with his glares. My protestations that everything was a lie fell on deaf ears. The principal announced my 10-day suspension as a sign that we don't tolerate violence. Back home, the situation completely escalated. My father wordlessly began packing my things into a suitcase. My desperate pleas to listen to me bounced off a wall of rejection. "A violent person like you has no place in this house anymore," were his only words. Crying and shaking, I stood in the hallway of our house, surrounded by hastily packed bags. My brother watched the scene from a safe distance, with a barely noticeable smile on his lips. At that moment, I realized that this was exactly what he had planned. My grandmother came to pick me up. Unlike everyone else, she believed me. Before leaving, she turned around one last time and confronted my parents. "You'll regret the day you cast out your own child," she said in a voice that brooked no argument. As we drove away, I watched in the rearview mirror as my home grew smaller and smaller. My tears slowly dried, but the pain of betrayal burned like fire in my chest. That day, I lost not only my home, but also the last remnant of trust in my family. The first weeks at my grandmother's were marked by deep sorrow. I spent hours lying in my new room, unable to eat or sleep. My grandmother tried everything to cheer me up, but the pain of betrayal ran too deep. Returning to school after the suspension was like walking through hell. Everywhere I felt the suspicious glances of my classmates. Even teachers who had liked me before treated me with cool distance. My brother, meanwhile, enjoyed his new role as the pitied victim. During this time, I discovered writing as an outlet for my feelings. At night, when nightmares kept me awake, I began scribbling my thoughts in an old notebook. Short entries became long texts. Personal experiences transformed into creative stories. My grandmother noticed my new passion. One day, she placed a flyer on my desk. An online platform was looking for young writers for product descriptions. "You have a talent," she said, "use it." Initially hesitant, then with growing enthusiasm, I began taking small assignments. The first texts were rough, but I learned quickly. Each successful assignment gave me back a piece of self-confidence. I saved the money I earned. Never again did I want to be dependent on others. At school, I remained an outsider, but it bothered me less and less. I focused on my grades and my growing freelance career. While my classmates partied on weekends, I sat at the computer, polishing texts for my first regular clients. My grandmother supported me unconditionally. She set up a small work corner in my room and made sure I took enough breaks despite all the work. "You are strong," she often said, "but don't forget to live." With each month, my portfolio grew. Small product descriptions became more challenging projects. First clients recommended me to others. While my parents and brother probably thought I would break under the situation, I was secretly building my future. Graduation approached, and with it the question of what next. Unlike my classmates, I already had a plan. My freelance work was going so well that I could afford to go to university without needing a cent from my parents. On my last day of school, my brother approached me. For the first time in a long time, he spoke to me directly. "You won't make it without us." I looked him in the eyes and just smiled. He couldn't know that I was already standing on my own feet. The years after graduation flew by. During my studies, I continuously built up my content writing business. Unlike many of my fellow students, I didn't have to work in crowded bars. My text provided me with a solid income. After graduating, I faced a decision: take the safe route of permanent employment or dedicate myself entirely to freelancing? I found the answer during a sleepless night. I decided to bet on myself. My grandmother supported my decision. "You've earned your freedom." I used this freedom. With my laptop as my only work tool, I traveled the world. I wrote texts from beach bars in Bali, from cafes in Paris, and from mountain huts in the Alps. My clients valued my reliability, and the assignments became increasingly prestigious. The real breakthrough came when a well-known lifestyle brand noticed me. They commissioned me to redesign their entire web presence. The project was challenging, but I threw myself into it with full energy. The results exceeded all expectations. The brand's positive reviews spread through the industry like wildfire. Suddenly, I was invited to industry events, received requests for interviews and guest contributions. My Instagram follower count exploded when I shared insights into my life as a digital nomad. A local television station became interested in my story. They invited me to speak on a show about modern work models. In front of the camera, I talked about my journey, about the challenges of freelance life, but not about my family. These wounds were still too deep. Back at my grandmother's, who had become my only real anchor by then, I spent much time in her garden. Among roses and herbs, I found the peace I needed after turbulent travels. She was proud of me. I could see it in her eyes, even if she didn't constantly say it. My success story spread. Universities invited me to speak to students. One guest lecture became regular seminars. I enjoyed showing young people that there were alternatives to the classic career path. In one of these seminars, a student asked me if I was ever afraid of failure. I answered honestly, "The worst has already happened to me, and I survived. What should I be afraid of now?" Fate's irony would have it that this very lecture went viral. A student had filmed parts of it and posted it online. The video spread rapidly, reaching hundreds of thousands of views, and finally, the eyes of those who had once cast me out. It was my grandmother who told me that my parents had seen the viral video. They had contacted her, asking for my number. After all these years of silence, they suddenly wanted to talk. My brother, she said, had also reached out. I took my time responding. For days, I walked through my apartment in Berlin, where I had recently settled, weighing the pros and cons. The successful businesswoman in me wanted to show them what I had achieved. The hurt child in me wanted to keep running. Finally, I agreed to a meeting in a neutral cafe on my terms. When I entered the location, I saw them sitting there. My parents, noticeably aged, and my brother, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. The conversation was awkward at first. They had prepared a speech about regret and forgiveness. My brother stammered an apology that sounded rehearsed. I listened quietly, stirring my untouched coffee. Then I started talking. I told them about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about the fear of never being good enough, about the loneliness after their betrayal. But I also told them about my grandmother's unwavering support, about my first successful projects, about the freedom I had found. My mother cried. My father stared at his hands. My brother seemed to shrink in his chair when I described how his lies had destroyed my life and how I had rebuilt it, piece by piece. They asked if we could try again as a family, start over. My answer surprised even me. We can try to build something new. But the old family, that's gone forever. Today, we maintain cautious contact. Sometimes we meet for coffee, exchange polite messages on holidays. It's not the close family relationship they might have hoped for, but it's all I can offer. My grandmother watched this development with wise eyes. "Forgiveness," she said to me one evening, "doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain." Looking back, I realized that my brother's betrayal, as painful as it was, set me on my path to independence. Without that break, I might never have found the strength to go my own way. My story has become a book, the one you're reading right now. Writing it was therapeutic, liberating. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes losing everything can be the beginning of finding yourself. Today, I know, I am not defined by what was done to me, but by what I made of it. And perhaps that's the greatest victory of all.